Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the monitor screen. The numbers were bad. Very bad. Food supplies would last maybe 3 more weeks if they cut portions again. Water was holding steady, but only because they had found the underground springs near the mining tunnels. Everything else was falling apart. The colony of Kepler 442b had been a success story 8 months ago. 847 people living and working on a world that actually had breathable air and decent weather. The mining operation was pulling rare metals from the ground faster than anyone had hoped. Children were playing in the settlements. Small park. People were talking about expanding to the southern continent. Then the wrack came. Jake pushed away from his desk and walked through the underground bunker that had become their home. The corridors were carved from solid rock, lit by emergency lighting that cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. People moved quietly through the passages, their faces showing the strain of 8 months in hiding. Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her medical station as Jake passed. She was treating another case of tunnel lung, the respiratory infection that was spreading through their cramped quarters. Her medical supplies were running as low as everything else. "How is she?" Jake asked, nodding toward the young woman on the examination table. "She'll live," Lisa said quietly. "But I'm down to my last few doses of antibiotics. If this spreads much more." She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what would happen. Jake continued through the tunnels until he reached the main command center. Captain Paul Bennett was hunched over a tactical display, studying the patrol patterns of the wrack ships overhead. The former Earth Defense Force Marine had been visiting the colony when the aliens arrived. Lucky for them, unlucky for him. "Any changes?" Jake asked. Paul shook his head. "Same pattern. 6 ships in constant rotation. They're not trying to break through our shields, just keeping us trapped down here like rats." The wrack had arrived without warning 9 months ago. Sleek ships with energy weapons that could melt rock. They had destroyed the colony's communication arrays in the first attack, cutting off any chance of calling for help. Then they had simply waited. At first, the colonists thought it was a siege. The aliens would demand surrender or try to starve them out. But the wrack seemed content to patrol overhead, occasionally firing at anyone who ventured too far from the settlement. They weren't trying to capture the colony. They were playing with it. "It doesn't make sense," Jake said, studying the display. "They could have finished us off months ago. Why keep us alive?" "Maybe we're not worth the effort," Paul replied. "Or maybe they're waiting for something." In the engineering section, Matt Rodriguez was working on their long-range sensors. The mining equipment had been modified to scan deep space, looking for any sign of rescue ships from Earth. So far, they had found nothing. "Anything out there?" Jake asked when he found Matt surrounded by cables and circuit boards. "Maybe," Matt said, not looking up from his work. "I'm getting some weird readings from the outer system. Could be nothing. Could be sensor ghosts. But there's something moving out there." Jake felt a small spark of hope. "Rescue ships? Too far away to tell. And the readings are strange. Whatever it is, it's not moving like a normal ship." The hope died as quickly as it had come. Jake knew better than to get excited about sensor readings. They had been fooled before by asteroids and comets that looked like ships on their basic equipment. He made his way to the surface level, where a few brave souls maintained watch through the armored observation posts. The artificial atmosphere of Kepler 442b was thin but breathable, and the red sun cast everything in a dim, bloody light. Through the reinforced windows, Jake could see the wrack ships hanging in the sky like metal vultures. They were beautiful in a deadly way, all curves and sharp edges, their hulls gleaming with some kind of energy field. Occasionally, one would dip lower, scanning the settlement with beams of blue light, then rise back to its patrol altitude. Sarah Blake, one of the geological survey team, was on watch duty. She had been studying the wrack ships for months, trying to understand their technology and tactics. "They're getting closer," she said when Jake joined her. Dropping down lower on each pass, something's got them stirred up. "Stirred up how?" "Look at their formation," Usually they fly in perfect geometric patterns, but for the last few hours they've been breaking formation, flying erratic patterns, like they're nervous about something. Jake studied the alien ships. Sarah was right. Their movements seemed agitated, almost frantic. What could make an advanced alien race nervous? Deep in the bunker's communication center, Alex Turner was monitoring radio frequencies. As the colony's former communications officer, he spent his days listening to static and electromagnetic noise, hoping to hear something, anything, from the outside universe. "Jake!" Alex called out when he saw the administrator. "You need to hear this." Alex played back a recording from his equipment. At first, it sounded like normal space noise, the background radiation that filled the void between stars. But there was something else underneath it. A pattern. A rhythm. "It's not natural," Alex said. "This is artificial. Something's out there, and it's big." The pattern was faint but unmistakable, a deep thrumming sound that seemed to pulse through space itself. It was getting stronger, which meant whatever was making it was getting closer. In the children's section of the bunker, teacher Amy Foster was trying to keep 37 kids calm and educated. She told them stories about Earth, about the green forests and blue oceans they had never seen. She taught them mathematics and reading by candlelight when the power cells needed to be conserved. But the children weren't stupid. They knew their parents were scared. They knew the food was running out. They knew the adults talked in whispers about things they didn't want the kids to hear. "Miss Amy," asked 10-year-old Danny Chen, "are we going to die down here?" Amy looked into the boys' serious eyes and tried to think of a comforting lie. But she was tired of lies. "I don't know, Danny. But we're going to keep trying to live. That's what people do." Back in the command center, the deep space sensors were going crazy. Matt had managed to boost their range by cannibalizing parts from the mining equipment, and what he was seeing made no sense. "Jake, Paul, you need to see this," Matt called out. The two men hurried over to the sensor display. On the screen was a contact moving through the outer system, but it wasn't moving in a straight line like a normal ship. It was appearing and disappearing, jumping from point to point in space like it was folding reality around itself. "How big is it?" Paul asked. Matt checked his calculations twice before answering. 3 kilometers long, maybe more. It's hard to get an exact reading because it keeps flickering. 3 kilometers? Jake stared at the screen. "That's bigger than anything in Earth's fleet." "That's not the weird part," Matt continued. "Look at this." He enhanced the sensor data, showing the contact's movement pattern. It's not using conventional propulsion. It's moving through space in ways that should be impossible. Above them, the Vrak ships were clustering together, their formations tightening like a fist. Energy readings were spiking as they charged their weapons and raised their shields. "They're scared," Paul said quietly. "Look at them. They're taking defensive positions." The mysterious contact was still days away, but its presence was already changing everything. For 8 months, the Vrak had been the masters of this system, hunting humans for sport. Now something was coming that made them afraid. In the medical bay, Lisa Carter was treating more cases of malnutrition and stress-related illness. But for the first time in months, she saw something different in her patients' faces. Not hope exactly, but curiosity. Word was spreading through the bunker about the contact on the sensors. Jake returned to his quarters, a small room carved from rock that contained a bed, a desk, and his few personal belongings. On the desk was a photo of his wife and daughter, who had died in the first Vrak attack when they were caught outside the settlement. He stared at the photo and tried to imagine what was coming toward them through the darkness of space. Rescue? Another enemy? Something worse than the Vrak? Whatever it was, it would be here soon. And after 8 months of slow death in the tunnels of Kepler 442b, Jake Morrison found himself almost eager to find out. The contact was moving faster now. Matt Rodriguez bent over his jury-rigged sensors trying to track something that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. The readings made no sense. Ships didn't move like this. Nothing moved like this. "It's definitely artificial," Matt announced to the small crowd gathered around his workstation. and it's definitely heading our way. Jake Morrison studied the display. The mysterious object was still 2 days out, but its approach was causing changes throughout the system. The Vrak patrol ships had abandoned their lazy circles around the planet and formed up into tight defensive formations. "They're afraid of it," Captain Paul Bennett observed. "Look at their formation, that's a battle screen. They're preparing for a fight." Through the bunker's makeshift communication system, Alex Turner was picking up scattered transmissions from the Vrak fleet. The alien language was impossible to understand, but the tone was clear. Panic, confusion, orders being shouted back and forth between ships. "They keep using the same phrase," Alex reported. "Something that sounds like Vash Kalar. They're saying it over and over." Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her patient files. "Any idea what it means?" "None. But whatever it is, it's got them spooked." Above ground, Sarah Blake continued her watch through the armored observation windows. The Vrak ships were no longer elegant predators floating through the sky. They moved with sharp, aggressive motions, their energy weapons charging and discharging, in what looked like weapons tests. "They're preparing for something big," Sarah reported over the comm system. "I've never seen them act like this." In the children's section, teacher Amy Foster was having trouble keeping her class calm. The adults, tension was spreading through the bunker like a virus, and children were excellent at sensing fear. "Miss Amy," asked 12-year-old Jenny Walsh, "why are the grown-ups so excited?" Amy considered her words carefully. "Something's coming. We don't know what it is yet, but it might be help." "From Earth?" Maybe. But even as she said it, Amy wondered if that was true. Earth was over 100 light-years away. Even if their distress signal had somehow gotten through, how could any rescue force arrive so quickly? The answer came 18 hours later. Matt had managed to boost his sensors enough to get a clear reading on the approaching contact. What he saw made him call Jake and Paul to the engineering section immediately. "It's a ship," Matt said, his voice tight with disbelief. "Human ship. Look at this." The sensor display showed a massive vessel emerging from what appeared to be folded space itself. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest vessels in Earth's colonial fleet, but it was definitely human in design, with the angular lines and defensive positioning of military architecture. "That's impossible," Paul said quietly. "Earth doesn't have ships like that." "It's transmitting," Alex called out from the communication station. "Human frequencies, standard Earth Defense Force protocols." The message was simple and direct. "USS Shadowhawk, Earth Defense Force Deep Strike Division. Civilian evacuation protocols are now in effect. Maintain current positions and prepare for extraction." Jake stared at the communication display. "Deep Strike Division? I've never heard of any Deep Strike Division." Paul was studying the tactical readouts. "Neither have I, and I was current on all EDF operations when I left Earth." He paused, checking the timestamp on the transmission. "This says they've been traveling for 3 months. Jake, that's impossible. Even our fastest ships would take decades to cover that distance." The USS Shadowhawk was still several hours away, but its presence was already transforming the system. The Vrak fleet was pulling back from the planet, gathering into a concentrated formation near the system's outer asteroid belt. 12 heavy cruisers and a battle carrier, Paul reported, studying their movements. "They're not running. They're preparing to intercept." On the surface, Sarah Blake watched through her telescope as more Vrak ships arrived. Reinforcements were jumping in from hyperspace, their sleek forms adding to the growing fleet. "Looks like they're calling in friends," she reported. "I count at least 20 ships now, all moving to intercept the incoming vessel." In the medical bay, Lisa Carter was treating colonists who had collapsed from excitement and stress. After 8 months of hopelessness, the sudden possibility of rescue was almost too much for some people to handle. "Take it easy," she told Marcus Webb, a mining engineer who was hyperventilating. "We don't know what's happening yet." But Lisa couldn't hide her own excitement. For the first time in months, they had reason to hope. The Shadowhawk continued its approach, and with each hour, its readings became more impossible to explain. The ship seemed to phase in and out of normal space, appearing solid one moment and translucent the next. "It's using some kind of dimensional technology," Matt reported. "The ship is partially existing in folded spacetime. I've never seen anything like it." Alex was monitoring more transmissions from the ship. The crew spoke in standard Earth English, but their references were confusing. "They keep mentioning things that don't exist," Alex said. "Deep strike protocols, Void-class weapons, something called the Ancient Integration. None of this matches any Earth Defense Force procedures I know." Jake found himself torn between hope and suspicion. The ship was clearly human, but it was using technology that Earth shouldn't possess. And there was something cold about the crew's communications. Professional, but distant. "Jake," Matt called, out urgently. "The Vrak fleet is moving to intercept. They'll reach the Shadowhawk in 6 hours. The battle would be fought far from the planet, but the colonists would have a front-row seat." Matt had managed to link their sensors to track both fleets as they closed on each other. 23 Vrak ships against 1 human vessel, Paul said grimly. "Those aren't good odds, even if it is a big ship." But as they watched, something strange happened. The closer the Vrak fleet got to the Shadowhawk, the more erratic their behavior became. Ships broke formation without orders. Weapons systems powered down and then back up. Communications between Vrak vessels became frantic. "They're afraid of it," Sarah observed. "Really afraid. I've never seen the Vrak act like this." Hours passed. The tension in the bunker was so thick it was hard to breathe. Children clung to their parents. Adults stared at sensor displays and communication screens waiting for news. Then Alex picked up something that changed everything. "New transmission from the Shadowhawk," he announced. "But this one isn't on standard channels. It's encrypted with codes I've never seen before." The transmission was brief, but its contents were chilling. "Vrak fleet designated hostile. Ancient protocols authorized. No quarter given. No prisoners taken. Time of mercy has ended." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Ancient protocols? What does that mean? Before anyone could answer, the sensor displays lit up with energy readings unlike anything they had ever seen. The battle had begun. But it wasn't a battle. It was something else entirely. The Shadowhawk seemed to simply disappear. One moment it was there, facing the Vrak fleet. The next it was gone from their sensors completely. Where did it go? Matt frantically adjusted his equipment. "I lost the signal completely." Then the Vrak ship started dying. The first heavy cruiser simply exploded, its hull tearing apart from the inside. There was no visible weapon impact, no energy beam. It just came apart like it was being pulled in different directions by invisible forces. A second ship suffered the same fate. Then a third. "What's happening?" Jake demanded. Matt was staring at his displays in shock. "The Shadowhawk it's everywhere and nowhere. It's moving through space in ways that shouldn't be possible. Appearing behind ships, firing, then vanishing before they can respond." The slaughter continued for 20 minutes. The Vrak fleet, which had dominated this system for 8 months, was being systematically destroyed by weapons that seemed to bend reality itself. When it was over, 18 Vrak ships were dead hulks drifting in space. The remaining 5 were fleeing toward the edge of the system, their faster-than-light drives charging desperately. The Shadowhawk reappeared on their sensors, whole and undamaged, moving toward the planet at a steady pace. "Incoming transmission," Alex announced. This time the voice was different. Female, with the crisp authority of high command. "Kepler 442b Colonial Settlement. This is Admiral Kate Sullivan, commanding USS Shadowhawk. We will be in orbit in 4 hours. Prepare for immediate evacuation. All colonists will be transferred to secure facilities pending debriefing and medical evaluation." The transmission ended before anyone could respond. Jake stared at the communication equipment. After 8 months of silence, of being forgotten by the universe, humanity had found them. But the ship that had come to their rescue was like nothing Earth had ever built. "Paul," Jake said quietly, "what's a deep strike division?" The former, Marine, was studying the tactical displays, his face pale. "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." In the depths of space, the Shadowhawk continued its approach. Behind it, the wreckage of the Vrak fleet drifted like a monument to the galaxy's new reality. Humanity had evolved, and it had brought weapons that could reshape space and time itself. The rescue had come. But as Jake Morrison watched the impossible ship grow larger on their sensors, he wondered if they were being saved or simply collected. The USS Shadowhawk entered orbit like a silent predator. Jake Morrison watched from the surface observation deck as the massive ship positioned itself directly overhead, blotting out a significant portion of the red sky. Up close, the vessel was even more disturbing than the sensor readings had suggested. Its hull was black as the void between stars, covered with geometric patterns that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The ship moved without visible engines or thrust, simply gliding through space as if the laws of physics were suggestions rather than rules. "It's beautiful," whispered Sarah Blake, standing beside Jake at the observation window. "And terrifying." Dr. Lisa Carter joined them, medical scanner in hand. She'd been taking readings since the ship arrived, and her results were troubling. "I'm detecting massive energy fields around that vessel," she reported. "The kind of radiation that should be lethal to any crew inside. But the patterns are controlled, shaped, as if the energy itself is being used as a tool." Captain Paul Bennett was in the command center, trying to establish communications with the Shadowhawk. After several attempts, Admiral Sullivan finally responded. "Colonial Administrator Morrison, report to the surface landing pad. You will be met by an extraction team." "Admiral, we have wounded and sick among our people," Jake replied. "Dr. Carter needs to coordinate medical transfers. All medical requirements will be addressed aboard our vessel. Prepare your people for immediate departure." The transmission cut off before Jake could ask any of the questions burning in his mind. Who was this Deep Strike Division? How had Earth developed such advanced technology? And why did Admiral Sullivan sound so cold, so distant? The first shuttle from the Shadowhawk descended through the atmosphere like a falling shadow. It was smaller than the main ship, but built with the same reality-bending technology. The craft seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, its outline shifting and blurring as it moved. Matt Rodriguez was tracking the shuttle's descent when his sensors detected something that made him call out in alarm. "Jake, the shuttle isn't following normal atmospheric entry procedures. It's folding space around itself. The friction and heat that should be tearing it apart are being redirected somewhere else." The shuttle touched down on the colony's main landing pad without a sound. No engine noise, no atmospheric disturbance. It simply appeared on the ground as if it had always been there. The airlock opened and 6 figures emerged. They were human, definitely human. But something was wrong. The Marines who stepped out of the shuttle moved with perfect coordination. Their actions synchronized in ways that suggested shared thought rather than training. Their armor was integrated with the same dark technology as their ship, panels, and surfaces that seemed to bend light around them. The squad leader removed his helmet, revealing a face that was recognizably human but somehow changed. His eyes held flecks of silver that moved like liquid metal, and when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that shouldn't exist in a human throat. "Administrator Morrison, I am Lieutenant Commander Ryan Cross. We're here to facilitate your evacuation." Jake stepped forward, trying to project authority despite feeling completely out of his depth. "Commander Cross, my people have questions. We've been trapped here for 8 months. We need to understand what's happened to Earth, how you found us, what this Deep Strike Division is." Cross nodded, but his expression remained neutral. "All questions will be answered during your debriefing aboard the Shadowhawk. Please gather your people. We have transport capacity for all colonists and essential equipment." "What about our dead?" asked Amy Foster, who had emerged from the bunker with several of the children. "We have graves here, people who died defending the colony." For the first time, Cross showed emotion. Something that might have been sadness flickered across his features. "The honored dead will be remembered, but this world is no longer safe for human habitation. The Vrak attack was not random. They were scouting for something much worse." Dr. Carter stepped forward with her medical scanner. "Commander, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from your team. Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" Cross glanced at the scanner, then at Lisa. We are modified, Doctor. Enhanced to work with our ship's systems. The process is necessary for deep space operations. Modified how? That will be explained during your medical evaluation aboard the Shadowhawk. As the colonists gathered their belongings, more shuttles arrived from the massive ship overhead. Jake watched as families said goodbye to the only home most of them had ever known. Children clung to toys they couldn't take. Adults stared at equipment and buildings they had spent years constructing. Alex Turner was trying to salvage what he could from the communication equipment when one of the enhanced Marines approached him. "That won't be necessary," the Marine said. "Our ships carry communication systems that make your equipment obsolete." "Obsolete how?" Alex asked. "We can communicate instantaneously across any distance. Space and time are no longer barriers to human coordination." The implications of that statement were staggering. Faster-than-light communication had been theoretical when the colonists left Earth. Now these people spoke of it as routine technology. As they boarded the shuttles, Jake found himself seated across from Commander Cross. The enhanced officer seemed willing to answer basic questions, though his responses raised more concerns than they resolved. "How long has Earth had this technology?" Jake asked. "The integration began shortly after your colony ships departed," Cross replied. "We discovered ruins in the outer solar system, ancient structures that contained technology far beyond our understanding." "Ancient structures? Built by who?" Cross was quiet for a long moment. "By us, by humans, from a previous expansion across the galaxy." The shuttle's interior was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of flowing energy, rather than solid matter, and the flight was so smooth it felt like they weren't moving at all. Dr. Carter was studying her readings of the enhanced Marines. "Commander, these energy patterns, they're not entirely human anymore." "Define human, Doctor." "Biological, genetic, the basic structure that makes us what we are." "Then no, we are no longer entirely human. The requirements of our mission necessitated certain improvements." Paul Bennett leaned forward. "What mission?" Cross met his eyes, and Paul saw something in those silver-flecked depths that made him deeply uncomfortable. The protection of human space against threats that conventional forces cannot address. The Vrak were small players, Administrator Morrison. They serve larger powers that view humanity as either a resource to be harvested or a threat to be eliminated. The shuttle docked with the Shadowhawk, and Jake's first impression of the ship's interior confirmed his worst fears. The corridors were vast and dark, lit by energy fields that pulsed like living tissue. The crew members they passed moved with the same eerie coordination as the Marines, and all of them showed signs of technological integration. Admiral Kate Sullivan met them in the main briefing room. She was tall and imposing with the same silver-flecked eyes as her crew. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Welcome aboard the Shadowhawk. I know you have questions and I will answer what I can. But first, you need to understand the situation you were rescued from." A holographic display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red markers indicated Vrak-controlled systems, but they were dwarfed by larger, darker symbols that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. "The Vrak hegemony is a client species," Sullivan explained. "They serve entities called the Void Seekers, beings that consume entire civilizations. Your colony was marked for harvesting. The Vrak were keeping you alive for processing." Amy Foster spoke up, her voice shaky. "Processing? Biological material, genetic samples. The Void Seekers use organic life to fuel their technology." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They hadn't been prisoners of war. They had been livestock. "How do you know all this?" Jake asked. Sullivan touched a control on the holographic display, and the image zoomed in on Earth's solar system. The planet was surrounded by structures that definitely hadn't existed when the colony ship departed. "Because we found the ruins of our own previous civilization. Humans have fought the Void Seekers before. We lost. The survivors hid their technology and went into deep hibernation, hoping their descendants would be stronger." "Are we?" asked Matt Rodriguez. Sullivan's smile was cold and sharp. We will be. The technology we've integrated gives us capabilities the Void Seekers don't expect. We can fold space and time. We can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We can become weapons that reshape reality itself. Dr. Carter held up her scanner. Admiral, what has this technology done to you? To your crew? These readings suggest massive physiological changes. We are still human, Doctor. But we are human, plus, enhanced, evolved. Adapted to fight an enemy that conventional humanity could never defeat. At what cost? Jake demanded. Sullivan was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, Jake thought he saw something that might have been regret. The cost is what we were, but the alternative is extinction, not just of humanity, but of every thinking species in this galaxy. The briefing continued for hours. The colonists learned that Earth had. Dr. Lisa Carter couldn't sleep. The quarters aboard the Shadowhawk were comfortable enough, but the walls hummed with energy that made her medical scanner go crazy. More disturbing were the readings she had taken of the ship's crew during their first day aboard. She found Jake Morrison in the observation lounge staring out at the stars through a transparent section that defied physics. Space should have been black, but here she could see streams of energy flowing between dimensions, like rivers of light in an ocean of darkness. Jake, we need to talk, Lisa said, settling into the chair beside him. I've been analyzing the medical data from the crew. What Admiral Sullivan told us about being enhanced doesn't begin to cover what's been done to these people. Jake turned from the impossible view. How bad is it? Lisa activated her scanner, showing him the data she had collected. Look at these readings. Their nervous systems have been completely rewired with some kind of crystalline network. Their blood contains microscopic machines that I can't even begin to understand. And their brain patterns. She paused, struggling to find the words. Jake, I don't think they're thinking individually anymore. What do you mean? Watch them. Really watch them. They move in perfect coordination, even when they're not trying to. They finish each other's sentences. When one learns something, they all seem to know it. It's like they're all connected to some central mind. The implications were chilling. Jake had noticed the eerie synchronization of the crew, but he had assumed it was just military training taken to an extreme. Are they still human? He asked. Biologically, yes. Mentally, I'm not sure. The technology hasn't replaced their humanity, so much as absorbed it into something larger. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Cross. The enhanced officer moved with his characteristic fluid grace, but Lisa noticed that his approach was perfectly timed to coincide with their discussion. Coincidence? Or had he somehow sensed what they were talking about? Administrator Morrison, Dr. Carter, Cross said with a slight nod. Admiral Sullivan requests your presence in the main briefing room. There are matters that require your immediate attention. They followed Cross through corridors that seemed to stretch longer than the ship's exterior dimensions should allow. Other colonists were being escorted through the vessel, their faces showing the same mixture of awe and unease that Jake felt. The briefing room had been reconfigured since their arrival. Now it contained medical examination equipment and what looked like integration chambers, cylindrical devices filled with swirling energy. Admiral Sullivan stood before a massive holographic display showing the galaxy. But this map was different from the one they had seen before. Vast sections of space were marked in red, and dark tendrils seemed to be reaching toward the core worlds. Ladies and gentlemen, Sullivan began, you are witnessing the final phase of a war that has been building for millennia. The Void Seekers are no longer content to work through client species like the Vrak. They are moving directly toward human space. The display zoomed in on a region near the galactic rim. Entire star systems were going dark, their lights winking out one by one. They consume everything, Sullivan continued. Planets, stars, even the basic matter that makes up space itself. What they leave behind is nothing. Literally nothing. Regions of space where reality itself has been eaten. Matt Rodriguez, who had been studying the ship's systems, raised his hand. Admiral, how is that possible? You can't just erase matter from existence. You can if you understand the fundamental structure of reality, Sullivan replied. The void. Seekers discovered how to break the bonds that hold the universe together. They feed on the energy released when space-time itself dissolves. Dr. Carter looked at her medical readings again. And the ancient technology you found, it can fight something like that? It can. But only if humanity is willing to pay the price. Sullivan gestured to the integration chambers. These devices will enhance your capabilities beyond anything you can imagine. You will be able to perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously. Your consciousness will be networked with others, allowing instantaneous communication and shared knowledge. Your bodies will be integrated with technology that can manipulate space and time. What's the catch? Asked Paul Bennett. Sullivan's expression didn't change. You will no longer be human as you understand the term. You will be something new, something necessary. Amy Foster stepped forward, her voice tight with emotion. What about the children? What about their right to choose what they become? The children will be given the best chance to survive, Sullivan replied. But survival requires adaptation. The universe has changed, Miss Foster. We must change with it or perish. Jake studied the integration chambers. They were beautiful. In an alien way, but there was something predatory about their design. Admiral, you mentioned preservation worlds. What exactly does that mean? Sullivan touched a control, and the holographic display shifted to show a peaceful-looking world with green continents and blue oceans. Preservation worlds are exactly what they sound like. Safe havens where unmodified humans can live out their lives in peace. They are protected by our fleets and hidden from the void seekers using dimensional shielding. Hidden how? The worlds exist in folded space-time. Pocket dimensions accessible only to those who know the precise coordinates. The inhabitants live normal lives, completely unaware of the war raging around them. Lisa Carter felt a chill. Unaware? You mean you don't tell them what's happening? Why would we? Knowledge of the void seekers would only cause panic and despair. Better that they live in peace, believing they are simply colonists on distant worlds. Like a zoo, Jake said quietly. Sullivan's silver-flecked eyes fixed on him. If you prefer that metaphor, yes. But a comfortable zoo where the exhibits are cherished and protected. The colonists exchanged glances. The choice was becoming clear, and none of the options were appealing. Alex Turner, who had been quiet throughout the briefing, finally spoke up. Admiral, what happened to democracy? To human rights? To the idea that people should control their own destiny? Democracy is a luxury for peaceful times, Sullivan replied. Human rights are meaningless if there are no humans left to exercise them. As for destiny, she paused, looking out at the stars. Our destiny is to survive. Everything else is negotiable. Matt Rodriguez raised his hand again. What percentage of Earth's population has undergone this integration process? Approximately 60%. The remainder live on preservation worlds or work in support roles for those who have been enhanced. Support roles? Resource production, technology development, cultural preservation. The integrated population requires a stable base of unmodified humans to maintain connection with our original nature. Dr. Carter looked at her scanner readings one more time. Admiral, I need to ask directly, are the integrated still capable of independent thought? Of questioning orders? Of moral choice? Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a note of something that might have been sadness. Doctor, when you are connected to a network of billions of minds, when you can perceive the cosmic scale of what we face, moral choices become different. We do what is necessary. We do what ensures survival. Even if it means losing your humanity, especially then. The briefing ended with each colonist being assigned to temporary quarters while they considered their choice. But as they left the room, Jake noticed that the integration chambers were being prepared for use. In his quarters, Jake found a datapad containing detailed information about the preservation world they would be sent to if they chose not to integrate. It looked like paradise. Green fields, clean cities, children playing in parks. But reading between the lines, he could see the truth. The preserved humans would be comfortable prisoners. Protected, cared for, but ultimately powerless. They would live their lives never knowing that their existence depended on the goodwill of beings who had transcended humanity to become something else. Lisa Carter visited him an hour later, her face pale. "Jake, I've been analyzing the medical data more carefully. The integration process, and it's not reversible. Once someone undergoes the enhancement, they can never go back to being simply human." "How many of our people are considering it?" "About half. Matt Rodriguez is definitely interested. He's fascinated by the technology. Alex Turner is torn. Paul Bennett is against it, but he's worried about his usefulness if he remains unmodified." Jake looked out his window at the streams of energy flowing through folded space. "What about you?" Lisa was quiet for a long time. "I'm a doctor, Jake. My purpose is to heal, to help people. If integration would let me do that on a scale I never imagined." She trailed off. But I keep thinking about the crew. They're efficient, capable, incredibly powerful. But when was the last time you saw one of them laugh, or cry, or show any real emotion? They seem to care about protecting humanity. Do they? Or do they just follow programming that tells them to protect humanity? There's a difference. Before Jake could answer, an announcement echoed through the ship. "All colonists report to the Yake Integration Bay. Individual consultations will begin immediately." The time for decision had come. Each of the survivors from Kepler 442b. The integration bay was larger than Jake Morrison had expected, with dozens of the cylindrical enhancement chambers arranged in precise rows. Each chamber hummed with barely contained energy, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with potential. Admiral Sullivan stood before the assembled colonists, her enhanced features showing no emotion as she prepared to oversee the transformation of the last purely human survivors from Kepler 442b. "Before we begin," Sullivan announced, "there is something you need to understand about the choice you are making." The holographic display activated one final time, but the image that appeared made several colonists gasp in horror. It showed a massive structure in space, easily the size of a moon, but clearly artificial. Its surface was covered with organic-looking growths that pulsed with sickly light. "This is a Void Seeker harvest ship," Sullivan explained. "We captured this image 3 days ago at the edge of the Centauri system. It is one of dozens moving toward human space." The image zoomed in, revealing details that were worse than Jake had imagined. The organic growths were actually processing centers where entire planets were being broken down into component molecules. Streams of matter flowed into the ship's core, where something vast and hungry waited. "The Void Seekers are not aliens, as we understand the term," Sullivan continued. "They are what we became, what humanity became the last time we expanded across the galaxy." The silence in the bay was absolute. Even the children stopped their nervous fidgeting. Dr. Lisa Carter found her voice first. "You're saying, we did this? Humans created those things?" 10,000 years ago, humanity discovered the same ancient technology we are using now. It made us powerful beyond imagination. We spread across the galaxy, conquering and consuming. We thought we were becoming gods. Sullivan touched another, control, and the display showed what might have been Earth but transformed into something mechanical and alien. The integration process is seductive. Each enhancement makes you more capable, more connected, more powerful, but it also makes you less individual. Eventually, the distinction between self and collective disappears entirely. Matt Rodriguez, who had been eager for integration, spoke up with a shaky voice. "Then why are you offering it to us?" "Because the alternative is extinction. The Void Seekers consume everything in their path. The only way to fight them is with their own weapons, their own technology. We must become monsters to defeat monsters." Commander Cross stepped forward. "But we believe we can avoid their fate. The preserved humans serve as anchors, reminders of what we once were. As long as some part of humanity remains unmodified, the integrated retain connection to their origins." Amy Foster clutched her daughter closer. "You're using us as a conscience, a way to remember what you're supposed to be protecting." "Yes, Sullivan replied without hesitation. You are our soul, Miss Foster. Without you, we become them. Jake stared at the Admiral, finally understanding the true scope of what was happening. The preservation worlds aren't refugees. They're insurance policies. You keep unmodified humans alive because you're afraid of what you might become without us. Fear is too simple a word. But yes, we maintain the preserved populations because we require them. The integrated mind is incredibly powerful, but it lacks certain qualities that are necessary for long-term survival. Like what? Creativity, unpredictability, the ability to see beyond logic and efficiency, the capacity for hope in the face of impossible odds. Dr. Carter looked at her medical scanner one more time. Admiral, how long do you think this war will last? Sullivan's expression grew distant. The last war against the Void Seekers lasted 3,000 years. We expect this one to take longer. 3,000 years? Alex Turner stared at the Admiral, in shock. How is that possible? Time moves differently when you can manipulate space-time itself. For the integrated, centuries pass like days. We have the patience of geology and the perspective of cosmic forces. But the preserved humans don't, Jake said quietly. No, you live normal lifespans. You experience time in a linear fashion. Your cultures and societies evolve naturally. In many ways, you are more alive than we are. The colonists exchanged glances. The choice they faced was not just between enhancement and preservation, but between two completely different types of existence. Matt Rodriguez was the first to step forward. I want the integration, he said firmly. If there's a chance I can help fight these things, I have to try. Lisa Carter surprised everyone by joining him. I'm a doctor. If I can be enhanced enough to develop treatments for integration sickness, to help bridge the gap between modified and unmodified humans, then I need to do it. One by one, others made their choices. About half the colonists chose integration, including Alex Turner and Captain Paul Bennett. The rest, led by Jake Morrison and Amy Foster, chose the preservation world. Are we making the right choice? Amy asked quietly as the integration chambers prepared to receive their first subjects. Jake watched Matt Rodriguez enter one of the cylindrical devices. The engineer looked excited and terrified in equal measure. I don't know, Jake admitted. But maybe that's the point. Someone has to be uncertain. Someone has to question whether any of this is worth it. The integration process was both beautiful and horrifying to watch. Energy flowed through the chambers like liquid starlight, and the subjects inside seemed to dissolve and reform multiple times. When Matt emerged, his eyes held the same silver flecks as the crew, and his movements had that characteristic fluid. Coordination. How do you feel? Jake asked him. Matt smiled, but it was different somehow. More controlled. I feel connected, like I'm part of something vast and wonderful. I can perceive dimensions I never knew existed. The mathematics of folded space-time is as clear as simple arithmetic. Are you still you? Matt paused, considering the question with inhuman patience. I am what I chose to become. What I needed to become. It wasn't really an answer, but Jake suspected it was the only one he was going to get. Dr. Carter's transformation was even more dramatic. When she emerged from the integration chamber, she immediately began working with the ship's medical systems. Her enhanced mind processing treatment options for genetic therapies that could help preserved humans adapt to new environments. I can see it all now, she told Jake. The connections between consciousness and reality, between biology and technology. There are treatments I can develop that will help both preserved and integrated populations. But are you still Lisa Carter? Guerrero smiled, and for a moment Jake thought he saw a flicker of the old Lisa in her enhanced features. I am Dr. Carter plus everything she could have become. Everything she needed to become to serve humanity's future. The group was splitting apart, in real time. The integrated colonists were already beginning to move with the same coordination as the ship's crew, their consciousness melding with the collective mind that governed the Deep Strike Division. Admiral Sullivan approached Jake as the last integration was completed. Administrator Morrison, your transport to the preservation world is ready. You and the others will find it quite comfortable. What will you tell them about us? Jake asked. The people who chose integration? We will tell them. You died heroes defending the colony. In many ways that will be true. Jake looked at the integrated colonists who were already deep in conversation with the ship's crew about strategic deployments and resource allocation. They seemed content, even happy, but there was something missing. Some spark of individuality that had been absorbed into the collective. Admiral, one last question. Do you ever regret what you've become? Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. Regret is a luxury we cannot afford. But yes, sometimes I remember what it felt like to be uncertain, to doubt, to hope for things that logic said were impossible. That's what you need us for. That's what we need you for. The transport ship was smaller than the Shadowhawk, but built with the same reality-bending technology. As Jake and the other preserved humans prepared to depart, they said goodbye to the integrated colonists who had once been their friends and neighbors. Take care of each other, Amy Foster told Dr. Carter. We will, Carter replied, but her voice carried harmonics that suggested she was speaking for more than just herself. As the transport departed, Jake looked back at the Shadowhawk through the observation window. The massive warship was already turning toward another mission, another battle in the endless war against the Void Seekers. Do you think we made the right choice? Asked Sarah Blake, who had chosen preservation. Jake thought about Matt Rodriguez and Lisa Carter, about Admiral Sullivan and her enhanced crew. They were still human in some sense, but they had paid a price that might be too high to calculate. I think we made the necessary choice, he said finally. Someone has to remember what we were. Someone has to hold on to the possibility that there might be another way. The preservation world appeared on their screens an hour later. It was beautiful, exactly as promised. Green continents, blue oceans, cities that looked like humanity's greatest achievements. But Jake knew the truth now. It was a museum, a zoo, a genetic preserve for a species that was evolving beyond recognition. As their transport descended toward the surface, Jake Morrison wondered what the children born on this world would think if they ever